So this urban legend was told to a friend of mine by their friend, and they swear that it's true. It started one Saturday evening when Mary Ann decided to meet her friends at Schrader Hall, which is in Schrader, Texas, which many people from Victoria are familiar with. So Schrader Hall is the second oldest dance hall in the state of Texas. What's neat about it is that grandparents, grandkids, everybody will go and they learn how to dance there, and the whole family attends, and it's usually a really safe and wonderful place to be. Sometimes you have live bands, sometimes you don't. I grew up dancing there and learned to dance there as well. So the story goes that Mary Ann decided to meet her friends there, but she decided to take her car because she knew she was going to leave earlier than her friends would, because she had something to do the next day. Not sure what it was, but she knew that she was going to leave sooner than her friends. So she took her own car and she met her friends, and they had a great time. And it was typical Schrader. You know, you bring your own bottle of whatever, because they sell beer and setups. And she didn't drink because she knew she was driving. And she had a blast, and when it was time for her to leave, she said her goodbyes, and her friends walked her to her car, and she got in her car and she started home. And when you leave Schrader Hall, you're on a farm to market road, which is still not highly traveled unless Schrader Hall has let out. You know, if it's time when the dance has let out, then it's pretty well traveled. But since the dance wasn't over and Schrader Hall wasn't closing, she found herself alone on that farm to market road, which was no biggie. She was familiar with it, and it wasn't particularly disturbing. But about 5 or 10 minutes into the drive, she noticed cars in the lights in the rearview mirror, and so she just kept an eye on them just to see, you know, in case they wanted to pass or something. The road's not more than 2 lanes, and so sometimes you've got people that have been drinking or whatever, and they get impatient, and so people that know that road are usually drive defensively and are pretty careful. She noticed that the lights were getting closer, and as they got closer and closer and closer, suddenly they started turning on their brights. And so she was thinking, well, if they want to pass, they want me to scoot over. Well, that's not a huge option, but she went ahead and scooted over as much as she could and put on her left indicator to let them know, and then turned it off real quick just to let them know, go ahead and pass me, you're good to go up here. And they didn't. They stayed behind her, and so she pulled back on the road, and she thought, okay, whatever. And she kept driving, and they started flashing their lights again, and so she slowed down again. And this happened about 2 or 3 times, and they would not pass her. They just stayed behind her. And once they had flashed their lights and she slowed down, then they stopped flashing their lights. So she got concerned, and she called her dad on her cell phone, and she told him what was going on, and she said, what should I do? And he said he lived on a highway that was off of there, and he said, come to my place instead of going home, because when you pull into my place, he lived out in the country, but he said, when you pull into my place, let me know when you're here, and I will meet you. And that meant he was going to meet her outside, and he was going to have his gun or whatever. So she kept him on the phone as long as she could, and he was encouraging her, and the light flashing happened again a couple of times, but then she would lose him because this is in the country, and so you don't always, you know, get good connections. But she would get him back, And this kept on for what seemed like forever. She finally made it to his place, and she was going down the long, narrow driveway to get to his place. And it happened one more time, and she slowed down, and the lights stopped blinking, and she was like, boy, you guys don't even know what you're asking for, because you're following me into trouble, because I'm pulling into my daddy's place. So she had her dad back on the phone, and she said, okay, I'm approaching. He said, I see your lights. I'm watching you. I'm outside. When you get here, get out of the car. Just put it in park and just jump out as fast as you can and get behind me. So she drove up, and she jumped out of the car, jumped behind her dad as quick as she could. He had his shotgun drawn, and the car pulled up, and he was about ready to fire away, and a guy jumped out of the car and was saying, don't shoot, don't shoot, don't shoot. He was like, trust me, I'm only here to help. He said, check her back seat. And so her father grabbed his light and his lantern, and he ran over to the car, and sure enough, down in her back seat, he found a guy, and he pulled him out and hog-tied him. And the guy that was following her said, I saw this guy pop up from your back seat, and I saw him with a knife, and I could see him in my lights, and so I would flash my lights, and then he would go back down and hide again. He said, I've been following you this whole time and flashing my lights every time he popped up from that back seat. She swears it's a true story. Check your back seats when you get in your car, people. Happy Halloween.